It was a rainy evening in the small village of Ikorodu, the kind of rain that fell so heavily it drowned out every other sound. I remember standing in the doorway of my friend's house, watching the thunder roll, when something caught my eye. A woman. She was walking down the muddy road wearing a wedding dress, but it wasn't the dress that shocked me. No, it was her face. She looked exactly the same as the last time I had seen her. 10 years ago, the day she vanished. You might think I'm crazy. A woman coming back after 10 years, not a single wrinkle, not a single grey hair. Impossible, right? But I swear to you, I saw it with my own eyes. This is the story of Lucy, the missing bride, and how her return shook everything we knew about love, marriage, and the darkness that sometimes follows it. It all started on a hot afternoon, just before Lucy's wedding day. Lucy had always been the picture of beauty and grace. Everyone in the village admired her. Her skin glowed like morning sunlight, and her smile could light up the dullest day. Her parents were well known and respected, and Lucy's wedding to Barnabas, the rich businessman's son, was all anyone talked about. People said it would be the grandest celebration the village had ever seen. That day, the air was electric. From the village square, I could already hear drums beating rhythmically, the chatter of women cooking huge pots of jollof rice, and the squeals of children running around with flowers in their hands. The smell of fried plantains and fresh spices floated through the air, making my mouth water. Everyone was either decorating, cooking, or getting ready to dance. But something felt off. I was standing near the main road with my cousins, teasing each other and laughing when I spotted her. Lucy was outside her father's house, her white wedding gown glowing faintly under the sun. She stood still, staring up at the sky as if she was searching for something. Her hands fidgeted with the edges of her veil, twisting and untwisting the fabric, her movements small but restless. "What's she doing over there?" one of my cousins whispered, nudging me. I shrugged, my eyes fixed on her. "She looks nervous. Maybe it's just wedding jitters." But deep down, I wasn't sure. This wasn't the Lucy we all knew. Lucy was always calm, graceful, and sure of herself. Today, she looked like someone lost in her own thoughts, carrying a weight no one else could see. "Hey, Lucy," I called out, my voice loud enough to carry across the yard. She didn't turn. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she lowered her gaze from the sky, adjusted her veil, and began walking, slowly, but with purpose. She was heading toward the edge of the village, toward the forest. "Where's she going?" my cousin asked, concern creeping into his voice. "She's supposed to be getting ready." "I don't know." My feet moved before I could think. "I'll check." I jogged across the road, my sandals kicking up little clouds of dust. "Lucy!" I called again, louder this time. She still didn't stop. Her steps were steady, but unhurried, the hem of her white dress dragging through the dirt, as if she didn't care it might get ruined. When I reached the edge of the forest, I hesitated. The tall trees loomed ahead, their shadows stretching like long fingers on the ground. Even during the day, the forest had a way of swallowing sound, making it feel like a place where you weren't supposed to go. "Lucy," I said again, softer now, almost like a plea. "Where are you going?" She paused, just for a moment, her back still to me. For a heartbeat, I thought she would turn around, explain everything, and laugh at how silly I'd been to worry. But instead, she stepped forward, disappearing into the trees. "Wait!" I shouted, my voice echoing back at me. But she was gone. I stood there, my chest rising and falling as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. The wind rustled the leaves above me, the sound almost like whispers. I wanted to follow her, to find out what was happening, but something held me back. The forest wasn't a place you entered lightly. Everyone in the village knew that. By the time I turned back, my cousins were staring at me with wide eyes. "What happened?" one of them asked. "Where did she go?" "She went into the forest," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. I don't know why." My words sent a ripple of unease through them. The forest was full of stories, old, dark tales our grandparents told us when we were young. It was where people disappeared, where spirits were said to wander. Lucy knew that as well as anyone, so why had she gone there? I didn't have an answer then. All I knew was that something was very, very wrong. And deep down, I had a feeling we wouldn't be seeing Lucy at her wedding. The drums in the village square kept beating, the sound faint and hollow in my ears, like a heartbeat growing fainter by the second. No one saw Lucy after that day. At first, everyone thought she was just running late. Her parents paced up and down their front yard, calling her name. Guests began to gather, murmuring to one another, wondering why the bride wasn't ready yet. The joyful drums in the village square started to sound out of place, their rhythm clashing with the growing sense of unease. When the sun dipped lower and there was still no sign of her, the panic set in. Her mother was the first to break, grabbing her husband's arm. "She's gone! Something's happened to her!" she cried, her voice cracking. Her father tried to calm her, but his trembling hands betrayed his fear. The search began that evening. Men armed with lanterns and machetes combed the nearby forest, shouting her name into the trees. "Lucy, Lucy, where are you?" The shadows between the branches seemed to grow thicker as night fell, swallowing their voices whole. I joined the search, my heart pounding with every step into the forest. The air was heavy, damp with the smell of earth and leaves. Every rustle made us jump, every faint noise had us whipping our heads around. But all we found were tangled roots and silence. "She couldn't have gone far," someone muttered, his voice shaky. But as the hours dragged on, that hope began to fade. The next morning, the village square was silent. The bright decorations, the neatly arranged chairs, the half-cooked pots of food, all of it stood abandoned. Lucy's disappearance hung over the village like a dark cloud. Her parents didn't rest. Day after day, they begged people to keep searching. They offered rewards, money, farmland, anything they could spare, to anyone who might bring her back. People searched for weeks, scouring the forest and the surrounding villages, but it was no use. Lucy was gone. Then the whispers began. "She ran off with another man," one woman said, shaking her head. "It's the only explanation." "No," another man argued, leaning in close as if sharing a secret. "She was taken. The spirits in the forest. They wanted her." The theories spread like wildfire. Some claimed they'd seen a strange light in the forest that night. Others swore they'd heard her voice calling for help but couldn't find her. But no one had proof. It was all stories, just like the tales our elders told us when we were children. Months turned into years. The wedding date came and went, each anniversary a cruel reminder of what could have been. Barnabas, her fiancé, didn't stay long after her disappearance. At first, he tried to help with the search, but as days turned into weeks, he withdrew. He couldn't take it, someone whispered after he left for Lagos. He loved her too much, but not everyone believed that. What if he knows something? Others speculated. What if he had a hand in it? No one dared confront him, though, and so the village moved on, or at least it tried to. But Lucy's absence left a hole that nothing could fill. Her parents aged overnight, their once lively home now eerily quiet. And as for me, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her disappearance than anyone realized. Something about that day haunted me, and I wasn't sure it ever would stop. It was late in the evening, and the rain had just started to fall lightly, the kind of drizzle that made the earth smell fresh and alive. I was standing outside my house, watching the clouds roll in, when I saw her. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. There she was, Lucy. Walking down the muddy road, her bare feet splashing in small puddles, wearing the same white dress she'd vanished in 10 years ago. The fabric clung to her like it was new, untouched by the years or the elements. My heart began to race, the air thick in my chest. I took a shaky step forward, then another. "Lucy?" My voice cracked. "Lucy, is it really you?" She stopped. Slowly she turned to face me, her movements graceful, almost too smooth. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, it felt like the world had gone silent. "Yes," It's me, she said, her voice soft and steady, like the whisper of leaves in a breeze. A chill ran down my spine. Something about the way she spoke, so calm, so certain, made my stomach twist. I stepped closer, squinting in the dim light. She looked exactly the same. Exactly. Her skin was flawless, smooth as the day she disappeared. Her hair still shone like polished ebony cascading down her back. Not a wrinkle, not a grey strand. I stammered, my words tumbling out before I could think. But how? You've been gone for years. Lucy, you... My voice broke, the disbelief too much to put into words. She tilted her head, a faint smile tugging at her lips. I'm here now, she said simply, as if that was enough of an explanation. My legs felt weak, and I struggled to keep my thoughts straight. We looked for you, Lucy, for weeks. Where were you? What happened? Her expression didn't change. She stood there, unbothered by the rain now soaking her dress and hair. I was lost, she said, her voice as calm as before. But I found my way back. Her words should have comforted me, but they didn't. There was something in her tone, something cold, distant, like she was rehearsing lines for a play. My eyes scanned her face again, searching for a crack in her composure, something that would make sense of this impossible sight. But there was nothing. Lost? I repeated, trying to process what she was saying. For 10 years? That doesn't make sense, Lucy. People don't just disappear like that. She didn't answer. Instead, she began to walk again, her steps slow and deliberate, as if she had all the time in the world. Lucy, wait, I called, hurrying to catch up. Your parents, they thought you were dead. The village, everyone thought you were gone forever. My voice shook as I spoke. You don't look... I hesitated, swallowing hard. You don't look like you've aged a day. She stopped again and turned to face me, her eyes calm but piercing, like she could see right through me. Does it matter? She asked, her tone soft but firm. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. It was as if her question carried a weight I wasn't prepared to bear. When I led Lucy back to the village that rainy evening, the world seemed to hold its breath. The rain was still falling, gentle but steady, turning the dirt road into a soft, squelching path under our feet. Lucy walked ahead of me, her white dress glowing faintly in the dim light of the village lanterns. As we reached the edge of the main square, people began to notice. First, a small group of children playing in the rain stopped and stared, their laughter falling silent. Then, one by one, the adults turned, their conversations halting mid-sentence. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Is that? One woman whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. It can't be, another man murmured, his brow furrowed. It's been 10 years. Lucy's parents were the last to see her. They were sitting outside their house, her mother weaving a basket, her father puffing quietly on his pipe. When they looked up and saw her, her mother's basket fell from her lap, scattering reeds everywhere. Her father stood so quickly his chair toppled over. Lucy, her mother whispered, her voice trembling. She stepped forward cautiously, like she was afraid the vision in front of her might disappear if she moved too quickly. Lucy, is it really you? Lucy stopped walking and looked at them, her expression calm. It's me, Mama. I'm home. For a moment, her mother stood frozen. Then she let out a wail so piercing it sent shivers down my spine and ran to her daughter, throwing her arms around her. Lucy's father followed, wrapping them both in a tight embrace. They cried together, their sobs echoing through the now silent square. At first, I thought their tears were from joy, but as I watched more closely, I saw something else in their eyes, fear. Her mother's hands trembled as she touched Lucy's face, and her father's jaw was tight, his eyes darting nervously around the crowd gathering behind them. Lucy smiled faintly, her expression unrelucible. I was lost, she said softly, her voice carrying just enough for those closest to hear. I wandered into the forest and couldn't find my way back. But now I'm here. The villagers exchanged glances, their faces filled with disbelief and unease. 10 years? Someone whispered, and she looks exactly the same. It's not possible, another muttered. No one disappears for 10 years and comes back like this. Some began whispering darker theories. She's a trickster, one woman hissed. She must have been hiding all these years, playing us for fools. No, an old man said, shaking his head. It's the forest. The spirits don't let you go without taking something first. I looked at Lucy, standing in the middle of it all, calm and unbothered by the storm of voices around her. She smiled faintly, her eyes scanning the crowd, but there was something in her gaze that made me uneasy. Her face was the same, her voice the same, but there was a coldness to her now, a distance that hadn't been there before. The village couldn't stop talking about her return. For the first few days, her parents kept her inside their home, shielding her from the curious and the suspicious. But even from the outside, something felt wrong. At night, I'd hear strange sounds coming from their house. Low murmurs, like a conversation just out of earshot. Sometimes, the dogs in the village would start barking wildly, their howls echoing through the night, only to fall silent all at once. On windy evenings, the trees around Lucy's home seemed to sway harder than the others, their branches creaking like they were alive. One evening, I decided to visit her. Her parents let me in reluctantly, their faces pale and drawn. She's in her room, her father said, his voice low. But don't stay too long. I nodded and climbed the creaking stairs to find Lucy sitting by the window. The room was dim, lit only by the faint glow of a lantern on the table. She was staring out at the forest, her hands resting lightly in her lap. Lucy, I said softly, stepping closer. She turned her head slowly, her eyes catching the lantern light in a way that made them seem to shimmer. It's good to see you, she said, her voice soft and even. I sat down across from her, struggling to find the right words. People are worried about you, I said finally. They don't understand what's happening. I don't understand. She looked at me for a long moment, her expression unrelucible. It's not what it seems, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't come back because I wanted to. I had no choice. Her words sent a chill through me. What do you mean, no choice? I asked. What happened to you out there? She turned back to the window, her gaze fixed on the dark line of trees in the distance. The forest doesn't let you go without a reason, she said softly, and it doesn't give you back without a cost. I stared at her, my stomach twisting into knots. Lucy, I whispered, what cost? She didn't answer. She just kept staring out at the forest, her hands tightening slightly in her lap. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the branches against the house. I felt a shiver run down my spine, and for the first time in my life, I didn't want to know the truth. Days after Lucy returned, I met an old man, someone from a neighbouring village. He wasn't a regular visitor to our community, but when he heard about her story, he came looking for answers, or perhaps to give them. He was small and hunched, with skin weathered like old leather, and a voice so deep it seemed to rumble in his chest. I've heard of this before, he said, his gaze fixed on me like he was staring into my soul. We were sitting outside my house under the shade of a mango tree, the air thick with the smell of damp earth from the recent rain. What do you mean? I asked, leaning closer, my pulse quickening. There's an ancient ritual, he began, his voice dropping to a near whisper. It's a bargain with the forest gods. It's rare, but it happens when a woman is about to marry. If the gods find her unworthy, impure in their eyes, they take her as their own. I frowned, trying to make sense of his words. Take her, what does that even mean? He sighed, shaking his head. The forest is older than this village. older than anything you can imagine. Its gods are not kind, and they don't forgive. They see what we cannot, and when they choose someone, it's final. Sometimes they return, but they're never the same. A chill crept over me as his words sank in. But why Lucy? I asked, my voice trembling. She was good, kind. What could they have wanted from her? The old man gave me a long, hard look. Her family, their traditions. These things don't happen by chance. They come with a history, one your village may have forgotten, but the forest hasn't. That conversation stayed with me, gnawing at the edges of my mind. Lucy's family had always been known for their strict adherence to ancient customs. They observed traditions that most of us only remembered during festivals. But no one ever talked about the darker side of those beliefs. It was like a puzzle piece snapping into place. Lucy's disappearance wasn't a simple case of running away. She hadn't been taken by a man or even by fate. She had been claimed by something much older, much darker. One night, when the full moon hung high in the sky, I saw Lucy walking again. This time, she wasn't wandering the village. She was heading straight for the forest. I didn't think. I just followed. The air was cold, sharper than it should have been for a night in the tropics. My breath came in quick bursts as I hurried after her, the soft glow of her white dress guiding me like a beacon through the trees. "Lucy!" I called out, but she didn't turn. Her steps were slow but steady, like she was being drawn by an invisible thread. The deeper we went, the quieter the forest became. The usual hum of crickets and rustling leaves faded until there was only the sound of my own footsteps and the soft swish of her dress against the ground. Finally, we reached a clearing, and I stopped in my tracks. In front of us stood an old, crumbling temple. Its walls were covered in moss, vines snaking their way up to the roof, and its entrance gaped open like the mouth of a giant beast. Lucy stepped forward, her movements calm and deliberate. Then she stopped and turned to face me. Her eyes glowed faintly in the moonlight, an eerie light that wasn't natural. "You can't follow me any further," she said, her voice soft but firm. It echoed in the stillness, sending a shiver down my spine. "Lucy," I whispered, my throat dry. "What is this place? What's going on?" "This is where the deal was made," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is where I belong." I didn't understand, but before I could ask more, she turned and walked into the temple. The shadows swallowed her whole, leaving me standing there, frozen in place. I wanted to run after her, to pull her back, but something deep inside me, the same instinct that tells you not to touch fire, kept me rooted to the ground. I don't know how long I stood there before I finally turned and stumbled back to the village. Days turned into weeks, and Lucy's return and her second disappearance became the stuff of legends. The villagers whispered about her in hushed tones, their words laced with fear and curiosity. Some said she was still in the temple, waiting for another soul to take her place. Others claimed she roamed the forest at night, her white dress glowing like a ghostly lantern. As for me, I couldn't forget her face. The calm, almost resigned look she wore, like someone who knew they couldn't escape their fate. I still hear her voice sometimes, soft and distant, carried on the wind when the night is especially still. If you ever find yourself in our village and see a woman in a wedding dress walking toward the forest, don't follow her. No matter how curious you are, turn around and leave. Trust me, some paths aren't meant to be walked.